The aim of this presentation is to describe the various site setup tasks required to set up the CHEETAH trial at your hospital. So what is site setup? Essentially, site setup is a process, and it's a process of identifying and preparing interested sites for site initiation and activation. It's a process of gathering site information to assess the site's suitability, to allow them to gain their local approvals, and to formalise a clinical trial agreement in the form of an RCT contract. And finally, it's a process of informing local regulatory boards and committees of the principal investigator and the site's intention of participating in a clinical trial. So site setup is a heavily regulated process, and this is for good reason. Ultimately, this complex process is there to protect all of the individuals involved in a clinical trial, including the investigators, the sponsor, but most importantly, the patients. The way that we can do this is by ensuring that the investigator and their site team have capacity and are fully prepared and equipped to carry out the trial safely in their centres, and that all of the necessary regulatory approvals are in place. As the sponsor for the trial, the University of Birmingham, specifically the trials team at BCTU, have a number of obligations, including defining and allocating all trial-related duties and functions, many of which are detailed as part of the RCT contracts between the university and each of the hubs, and similarly these will be detailed between the hubs and their spoke hospitals. And participating investigators need to be very clear and understand their responsibilities as PIs collaborating in this trial and the implications of that role. There are a number of key stages towards the green light, so i.e. site activation, and we'll talk through each of those stages in a little bit more detail. The feasibility assessment, so that's performed by the hub team. The hub team will confirm that it's feasible to deliver CHEETAH and that they have at least 4 eligible hospitals in country also able to participate in the trial. The next step is contract negotiation. So the diagram to the right-hand side of this slide highlights the overseeing institution. So essentially the University of Birmingham is the overseeing institution for the hubs and therefore contracts with the hub. The hubs are the overseeing institution for their spoke hospitals and therefore contracts or establishes a memorandum of understanding with each of their spokes. One of the most important elements of contract negotiation is to establish your resource requirements. So hubs should be identifying spokes and begin liaising early with local investigators. Hubs and spokes need to determine their resource requirements in terms of staffing and the equipment needed to run CHEETAH at your site. It's also a good time to begin thinking about who will negotiate contracts at your site, who will apply for regulatory approvals, and when and who you can identify to perform the various trial-specific tasks within CHEETAH. So in terms of pre-submission and seeking regulatory approvals, again, the overseeing institution responsibilities are highlighted on the right-hand side. So UOB will provide advice and support on the associated processes to the hub, and spoke hospitals should liaise with their hub team for advice, support and assistance with their local submissions. Ahead of any submissions, there are a number of things that you'll be wanting to think about. So for hubs, you need to consider if any trial documents require translation and which languages to include. Consider the country-specific changes to the protocol in terms of consent. So will you seek written or verbal consent from patients? And is this likely to be acceptable to your ethics and IRB boards? And if you intend to recruit paediatrics into the CHEETAH trial? Establish early on which regulatory submissions are required. For example, local or national ethics approval, institutional review board approval, and importantly, the specifics of these submissions. So how documents should be submitted, the format of submissions, i.e. via email or in person, and do hard copies of documents need to be presented. One important point to highlight on this particular slide is there's no trial-specific insurance in place for CHEETAH. It's a low-risk trial as we've described within the protocols. There is no trial-specific insurance in place. So let's consider the logistics, the equipment and the staffing needs for running CHEETAH successfully at your site. In terms of interventions in CHEETAH, so the additional gloves, these should be funded as part of the hospital's normal glove purchasing processes and reimbursed via the hubs. For the sterile instrument packs, firstly ascertain your local hospital practice. So if the sterile instruments can be separated from the main instrument packs, for example, at the start of the operation, or alternatively, if new instrument packs will need to be procured. BCTU will work with the hubs to fund additional supplies, and Spoke should liaise with the hub team to discuss their individual needs and requirements to move CHEETAH forward at your site. During the on-site monitoring visits, hubs need to oversee intervention stock levels, so gloves and instruments at each of their Spoke hospitals, to ensure that adequate supplies are available for the predicted recruitment numbers. Both hubs and Spoke hospitals should think about equipment, for example storage space, computers and staffing required to deliver CHEETAH and the associated training required for each of those staff members in post. Before a site can open to recruitment, all staff working on the CHEETAH trial must be adequately trained on the protocol and the associated processes to enable them to perform the trial-specific tasks that have been delegated to them. Good clinical practice is mandatory for all staff performing any trial-related tasks. For those of you participating in the Falcon trial, you may already have completed your GCP training, and therefore this does not need to be repeated to participate in CHEETAH. However, the CHEETAH trials team will need to see evidence of your training, so your GCP certificate, for example, and this training must be updated every 2 years. If you have not completed your GCP or you need to update your training, then there is a link to the Global Health online training module towards the end of this video. In addition to GCP training, all staff should attend the site initiation visit, and that can be either in person or via the teleconference, and you should have completed the online training modules appropriate to your role via the REDCap online platform. A current CV for all investigators, signed and dated within the last 2 years, should also be held and stored in the investigator site file at each of your sites. It's important to document all training on the CHEETAH training log. The purpose of the training log is to ensure you have a clearly documented record of all trial-specific training each site staff member has received. This is to document they've been trained on the trial specifics and ensures that the trial is conducted in accordance with the protocol. Examples of training that should be recorded on the log are as we've discussed on the previous slide, so all site initiation training, GCP training, but also any departmental meetings or similar that you hold to inform other departments about the trial specifics of the CHEETAH protocol. You should also document when new staff members join the team and review the SIV slide set. Another important document required as part of the site setup process that needs to be completed and filed in the investigator site file is the staff signature and delegation log. The purpose of this log is to identify site staff members who will be taking on the trial-specific tasks during the lifetime of the trial. It's a document that will grow over time as new members join the team and as members leave the trial, and these movements of staff should be recorded on the site signature and delegation log. The PI should delegate responsibilities to each member of staff according to their job role, their skills and their responsibilities within the trial. And the PI should initial each of the delegated entries to demonstrate some PI oversight of the trial. The site signature and delegation log will be provided along with a completion guide to help you start to complete this during the site setup phase and to help you maintain the document over the life cycle of the trial. The final document that should be completed during the site setup phase is the source data agreement. The source data agreement is essentially a document which details where source data is stored at your site. For example, is the source data on paper, is it electronically stored, or is it a combination of both? Where are the files stored at your site? For example, a particular office or filing cabinet holding the trial-related files. And importantly, how the data can be accessed by the trials team from BCTU when they're visiting the hubs and when the hubs visit their spoke hospitals too. There are a couple of systems and login accesses that you're required during site setup. So firstly, the REDCap database is the electronic system for all CHEETAH trial data entry. So data from the paper CRFs is transcribed onto the electronic data system for electronic transmission. We do discuss this in a bit more detail in a separate online presentation which will guide you through entering data and using the REDCap database. The next link is the GCP online training link. It also provided here along with some instructions on how to register and access that training module. Best practice for site setup and for site activation is to hold a site initiation visit as close as possible to issuing that green light to enable that the site start recruitment shortly following training. As with other processes described, BCTU will deliver SIV training to hubs, and hubs, in collaboration with the trials team at BCTU, should deliver training to their spoke hospitals. This can be either face-to-face or via a number of online platforms, as you determine locally. The aim of the SIV is to train all site staff on the CHEETAH trial and the trial-specific procedures that go along with that trial to ensure that sites really are ready for activation. The key staff that must attend the SIV training are the principal investigators and co-investigators, research staff, for example the research nurse, the data managers, etc. Other staff that may require trial-specific training, but not necessarily the complete SIV slide set, should be directed to the online training videos accessed via the RedCap online platform. In terms of permission to start recruitment, commonly this is known as the green light, and it's issued to sites via a site activation letter once all trial activities are completed and appropriately documented. To assist you in capturing the relevant information regarding completion of these setup tasks, a site activation checklist has been created. This checklist should be completed to document all of the steps ahead of activation. It's to confirm that all of those steps have been performed appropriately, for example, that all applicable regulatory approvals are in place, that agreements and contracts are fully executed, and all appropriate training has been provided to the site staff, including SIV and GCP training. The diagram to the left-hand side of the slide again highlights the overseeing institution responsibilities. So the University of Birmingham is the overseeing institution for the hubs and will therefore issue the green light to hubs. The hubs will, in time and in collaboration with the trials team at the BCTU, issue the green light to their spoke hospitals. Initially, BCTU will help facilitate spoke activations and work with hub teams to activate hospitals independently once the hub is fully up to speed with the processes. At present, all completed site activation checklists must be returned to the trials team at BCTU, and the green light should not be issued before approval by BCTU.